I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast tonight. Here are the top headlines.
A public transport worker shot dead 8 people at a California rail yard before turning his gun on himself as police arrived.
Tens of thousands of people flee the eastern district of DR Congo, city of Goma, towards neighboring Rwanda after authorities warned of possible new eruptions from the Nyiragongo volcano, including underneath the nearby Lake Kivu.
President Duterte warns that an arrest of protocol violators is now mandatory as they continue to defy the strict quarantine and health rules and the prevailing pandemic.
And U.S. President Joe Biden orders U.S. intelligence agencies to report to him in the next 3 months on whether the COVID-19 virus first emerged in China from an animal source or from a laboratory accident.
Another shooting in the U.S. A public transit worker shot dead 8 people at a California rail yard Wednesday before turning his gun on himself as police arrived, according to officials, after the latest mass shooting to hit the U.S. Take a look.
About 6:34 a.m. this morning, Santa Clara County Communications Center received multiple 911 calls, a shots fired call, multiple shots fired calls in the area of 101 West Younger Avenue in the city of San Jose. This building is a VTA control center, a Valley Transportation Authority control center, and is a hub that stores multiple VTA trains and maintenance yard as well. I will tell you about the suspect right now. The suspect is confirmed deceased. I will not go into details as what the cause of death is at this point, but the suspect is deceased at this point, so the public safety is safe at this point.
The suspect, identified by multiple media outlets as Samuel Cassidy, was an employee of the Valley Transportation Authority, which provides rail and bus services for San Jose, a Silicon Valley tech hub of almost 1 million people. San Jose police were also investigating a house fire believed to be linked to the shooting, according to multiple U.S. media reports. The blaze began at the suspect's home shortly before the attack, and the shooter's ex-wife, Cecilia Nelms, told the Bay Area News that Cassidy had often spoke angrily about his co-workers and bosses and at times directed his anger at her. An ex-girlfriend, meanwhile, additionally accused him of raping and abusing her, often during violent mood swings, according to court records cited by the San Francisco Chronicle. Local officials said the shooting, which was initially reported before 7 in the morning local time, had taken place at an employee meeting with at least 80 staff on site at that time. The Bay Area is no stranger to such spurts of violence. In July 2019, a 19-year-old gunman opened fire at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, located about 30 miles from San Jose, killing 3 people and wounding more than a dozen. President Biden last month branded U.S. gun violence an epidemic and an international embarrassment. There were more than 43,000 gun-related deaths in the U.S. last year, including suicides, according to the Gun Violence Archive.
In other news, more than 150 people were feared drowned in northwest Nigeria on Wednesday after an overloaded boat ferrying passengers to a market sank in the Niger River, according to local officials. The boat was traveling between central Niger State and Gwara in northwest Kebbi State when it sank, National Inland Waterways Authority local manager Yusuf Birma told reporters. Birma said the boat capacity was not up to the 180 passengers it carried. Birma said passengers were heading to a market in Malele in Bordu, local government area of Niger State, when the boat sank an hour into the journey. Local district administrator Abdullahi Buhariwara said earlier blamed the accident on overloading as the boat was meant to ferry no more than 80 passengers. President Muhammadu Buhari said the accident was devastating and offered his condolences to families, though his statement gave no official total of the number of casualties.
Now, here in the country, President Duterte warned that arrest of protocol violators is now mandatory as they continue to defy the strict quarantine and health rules amid the prevailing pandemic. The president made the pronouncement in his state public address after local government secretary Eduardo Año's report about 3 super spreader events that contributed to the spike in COVID cases in the country. Take a look.
I think there's a law in the... Huwag ninyo akong pilitin na talagang pahirapan ko kayo. We will review the national laws regarding the matter. But I think there's something in the revised penal code. Pero alam mo kasi, hindi naman talaga yung krimi na may ginawa kayo. Except that most of you are committing a crime. Kasi alam ninyo na after swimming together, a lot of you get positive na for COVID-19. Parang wala kayong binabaliwala ninyo ang pakiusap ng gobyerno. And it's criminal for you to get the COVID and pass it on to another innocent person. I will look for a suitable law because you are now forcing my hand to get into this thing and control it. Ayaw ninyo magpasaway and I make it mandatory. And this will be the job of the municipal mayor, city mayor, and the barangay captains. Kayo mga barangay captain, do you know that you have committed a crime of dereliction of duty? Tignan ninyo sa revised penal code, magkonsulta kayo ng abogado. Talagang ang unang ipakulong ko, yung barangay captain. Having committed the crime of dereliction of duty under the revised penal code. Kung ayaw ninyo, umalis kayo. Kasi pag ulit ito, pag may isa pa, beginning tonight, pag may isa pa, ang unang hulihin ang barangay captain. I'm ordering the police to arrest the barangay captain and bring him to the station, investigate him for being a derelict of dereliction of duty.
Now, as we heard there, the president was saddened that many are still ignoring the government's repeated calls to follow minimum public health standards. The president also reminded the local officials to ensure the strict implementation of quarantine and health protocols amid this pandemic.
In other news, the Swiss government has announced further steps to ease COVID-19 restrictions as the average number of new daily infections drops. What COVID measures will Switzerland relax from Monday? We have Ben Glauser joining us live.
Hi, CJ. Yes, so the COVID-19 situation here in Switzerland keeps on getting better with the fall of the case number. And because of that, the country planned to ease many restrictions. After consultation last May 26th, the Federal Council announced they will go for their 4th round of lifting restrictions starting Monday, May 31. And actually, they are going further than originally planned in the consultation, especially when it comes to events, private gatherings, and restaurants. This is indeed due to the improved epidemiological situation lately. In this fourth round of easing restrictions, public events will be up to 100 people indoors instead of 50 and 300 people outdoors instead of 100. Half of the capacity of the venue may now be used instead of a third, and this applies to religious events as well. A maximum number of people increased to 50 will be applied on non-spectator and non-audience events such as club meeting or guided tours. And there are no longer any restrictions on gatherings of people in public spaces. Now going to private gatherings, the limited number of people rises from 10 to 30 indoors and from 15 to 50 outdoors. Restaurants will be able once again to serve guests indoors if there is distancing or screens, not more than 4 people per table. Contact details of all guests will be recorded and guests remain seated. In outdoor areas, there can be up to 6 people per table. Seated guests don't need to wear face masks, but need to wear it in case moving around the premises indoors and out. However, the staff still have to wear a mask, and closing the establishment between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. is no longer required. Maximum 50 people instead of 15 can now play sport together, and this with spectator allowed as long as the rules for public events are applied. Matches for team sport are only allowed outdoors. Contact sports are allowed indoors without mask in fixed group of 4 people. Thermal baths and spa facilities may reopen, and activities can be held without masks but still with social distancing, 15 square meters per person. Same goes for indoor swimming pools. Just like for sport, a group up to 50 people will be allowed for cultural activities, and amateur and professional choir performances are once again allowed as well. In higher education, professional education, and continuing education institutions, the limited number of 50 people is lifted, and capacity restrictions are no longer applied. Working from home is no longer a requirement, but rather a recommendation for businesses that carry out weekly testing, but the rules to protect people at high risk in the workplace still come into force. Exempted from contact and travel quarantine for 6 months are the people recovered from COVID-19 and the people vaccinated. Additional to that, the latter are exempted from the requirement to be tested and provide contact details when arriving in Switzerland. People under the age of 16 are exempted from travel quarantine, and all these do not apply if the travelers come from countries with virus variants of significant concern. Even large-scale event with over 1,000 people has been discussed in the consultation to be pursued in a 3-step plan for this coming summer. Back to you, CJ.
Well, thank you so much, Julianne, for your report coming out of Switzerland. I know you're easing the restrictions there, but please do take care still.
Yes, thank you for having me, CJ. I'm Mendoza, reporting from the Geneva, Switzerland, and we live in interesting times.
A 2-month-old infant in Taiwan has tested positive for COVID-19, probably the youngest in the world to test positive for COVID. Here's more from Keith Ong. Keith?
A 2-month-old infant is the youngest among the latest COVID-19 positive in Keelung City, Taiwan. According to city authorities, the mother brought her baby to the hospital on the 20th of May for a usual infant immunization, after which the baby then was reported to have fever. At first, the mother thought it was just the usual side effect of the vaccine, but days after, when one of the household members tested positive in the rapid screening test, all the other household members, including the baby, all went through COVID-19 tests, wherein the baby later on turned out to be COVID positive. On Wednesday, the Central Epidemic Command Center, or CECC, announced new cases totaling 635, composed of 319 local cases, 2 imported, and 331 from backlog test results. 11 new deaths were recorded, bringing the total to 46 deaths since the pandemic started. The first ever case outside Taiwan's main island was also reported today in Lianjiang County. On Wednesday, the government announced the extension of Alert Level 3 status until June 14th, which continues restriction on social and religious gatherings, prohibition on dine-in services of restaurants, and implementation of online learning and work-from-home policies. Weddings could still be held, however, prohibiting banquet receptions, while funerals are not allowed to hold public viewing. From Taipei City, Taiwan, for Eagle News, I am Keith Ong. We live in interesting times.
Thank you so much, Keith. Now, in other news, a 6,000-member Tokyo Medical Practitioners Association called for the Olympics to be canceled. Much of Japan, including Tokyo and Osaka, is under a state of emergency, which forced IOC President Thomas Bach to cancel his trip to Japan this month. The details from Dennis Liu. Dennis.
Good evening, Alma and CJ. A Tokyo medical group warned today that the Olympics should be held without spectators because of virus risks, while a doctors' association urged outright cancellation, warning of potential disaster. Medical groups have warned the massive event could introduce new variants to Japan and strain medical resources as the country battles a fourth virus wave. The Tokyo Medical Association, with over 20,000 members, has not called for an outright cancellation, but its chairman Haruo Ozaki said Thursday that holding the games without spectators is the bare minimum given the current situations. Organizers have already barred overseas fans from the Tokyo Games, an unprecedented decision for the Olympics. A decision on domestic spectators is expected in late June. The virus states of emergency in several regions, including Tokyo, are expected to be extended this week until June 20th. Ozaki urged the government to take stricter measures against the virus immediately, warning this is the last chance to subdue infections before the Games. Tokyo's current virus restrictions allow venues to have up to 5,000 fans or 50% capacity, whichever is fewer. Olympic organizers say extensive rulebooks with virus countermeasures will keep participants and the Japanese public safe. The measures include daily testing for athletes and a ban on using public transport. But Naoko Ueyama, chair of the Japan Doctors Union, said bringing tens of thousands of athletes, staff, media, and officials from around the world pose a real danger, particularly of spreading variants. Olympic organizers have insisted they will not create additional pressure on Japan's healthcare system, with the International Olympic Committee offering to bring in medical staff to ensure the Games do not prove a burden. Calls from organizers for volunteer nurses caused an uproar, but a request for volunteer doctors actually ended up attracting nearly double the required specialists. Polls show around 80% of people in Japan want the Games either canceled or postponed for another year. Several parts of Japan are under virus states of emergency over a surge of infections, and the public is largely opposed to holding the Games this summer. However, Japan's government and Olympic organizers say the show will go on, and the first athletes are expected to begin arriving for training camps from next week. This is the latest for now. Alma and CJ reporting from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Dennis, always for your time. Meanwhile, in a related news, the EU and Japan said today they backed the holding of a safe and secure Olympic Games, despite calls for the event to be cancelled due to the pandemic. European Commission Chief von der Leyen insisted. The leader said, we're looking forward to the Olympic Games during their video talks. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Madam President.
I think, indeed, we have, of course, said that we're looking forward to the Olympic Games. No more has been discussed. But the signal that from the European Union, more than 100 million doses of vaccines have been authorized to be exported to Japan also is a strong sign that we support any preparation for the Olympic Games and the safety of these games.
Japan is the largest importer of vaccines from the EU, but authorities in the country face criticism over the slow rate of inoculations that has left it lagging behind other developed economies. Medical groups have already warned, as Dennis Liu had reported, that the massive event could introduce new variants to Japan and strain medical resources as the country battles a fourth virus wave. Organizers have already barred overseas fans from the Tokyo Games, an unprecedented decision for the Olympics. A decision on domestic spectators is expected in late June.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden on Wednesday ordered U.S. intelligence agencies to report to him in the next 3 months on whether the COVID-19 virus first emerged in China from an animal source or from a laboratory accident. Agencies should redouble their efforts to collect and analyze information that could bring us closer to a definitive conclusion and to report back to me in 90 days. Biden said that in a statement released by the White House. According to Biden, agencies are currently split over the two possible sources for the virus that swept the planet over the past year, killing more than 3.4 million people, a figure experts say is undoubtedly an underestimate. Biden's order signals an escalation in mounting controversy over how the virus first emerged through animal contact at a market in Wuhan, China, or through release of the coronavirus from a highly secure research laboratory in the same city. The answer has immense implications for both China, which says it is not responsible for the pandemic, and for the United States.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Humanda na kayo dahil this is gonna be an exciting battle para sa ating monthly finalist. This is Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 Singing Edition.
This program is supported by China Bank. Your success is our business.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. Thousands of people were homeless today after a cyclone battered COVID-ravaged India and neighboring Bangladesh, killing 9 people, including 4 children. Cyclones are a regular menace in the northern Indian Ocean, but many scientists say they are becoming more frequent and severe as climate change warms sea temperatures. Barely a week after Cyclone Tauktae claimed at least 155 lives in western India, Cyclone Yas forced the evacuation of more than 1.5 million people in the eastern states of West Bengal and Odisha. The storm hit on Wednesday with torrential rain and howling winds gusting to up to 155 kilometers an hour, equivalent to a Category 2 hurricane. Waves the size of double-decker buses pounded the shore and swamped towns and villages along the coastline, exacerbated by a higher than normal tide because of a full moon. Cyclone Yas has since moved inland towards the state of Jharkhand, easing to a deep depression, but still bringing heavy rains.
In other news, tens of thousands of people fled the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, city of Goma, on Thursday towards neighboring Rwanda after authorities warned of possible new eruptions from the Nyiragongo volcano, including underneath the nearby Lake Kivu. Take a look.
Ima tremblement sitaiwezi. Mimi decide kwanza tuvuke ngambo ingine juko hakuna ile matremblement. Juko supporter ile matremblement amina viona iko difficile kwanza.
The city has been on edge since Africa's most active volcano erupted on Saturday, leaving at least 32 people dead. Tens of thousands of residents fled Goma last weekend after Nyiragongo erupted on Saturday night, many across the nearby border to Rwanda before returning. But strong aftershocks have continued to rattle the city, leading some buildings to collapse and leaving residents fearful. Local volcanologists have recorded hundreds of aftershocks since Nyiragongo, which sits just a dozen kilometers or 8 miles from Goma, roared back into life. General Constant Dima, the military governor of North Kivu province, said that the latest data, including on deformation of the ground, indicates the presence of magma under the urban area of Goma, with an extension under Lake Kivu. The situation, said, can change rapidly and is being constantly monitored. That was said in a broadcast address. The volcano spewed out 2 rivers of molten rock during the eruption, one of which came to halt on the edge of Goma after obliterating villages in its wake.
Back to the pandemic situation around the world. 5 million people in Melbourne were ordered into a snap week-long lockdown today, facing a cluster of 26 cases linked to the highly infectious Indian strain of COVID-19, according to authorities. And the authorities issued stay-at-home orders for Melbourne and surrounding Victoria State from midnight. Let's listen in.
In the last day, we've seen more evidence that we're dealing with a highly infectious strain of the virus, a variant of concern which is running faster than we have ever recorded. As of first thing this morning, we've identified in excess of From first thing this morning, we've identified in excess of 10,000 primary and secondary contacts who will need to either quarantine or test and isolate, and that number will continue to grow and change.
There are no certainties, there are no guarantees in a global pandemic and against a virus, an insidious virus such as this. The next 7 days in Victoria will be very challenging. And of course, we are very mindful of the distress and the difficulty that this will impose upon people right across Victoria as a result of what is being described, rightly I think, by the acting Premier as a circuit-breaking lockdown,
The Indian variant makes it that you're more likely to pass the infection on if you're infected yourself. And that sort of increase in transmission and also the amount of virus a person might be transmitting makes it that the next person is more likely to get infected. So this is our reality, though, ongoing at least for the next 6 to 12 months, until we get vaccination levels up to a level where most people are protected, because those vaccines do 2 things. Number 1, they stop you if you get exposed to the virus from getting sick. And number 2, they stop the ongoing transmission to other people. They reduce that. They're not 100% perfect, but they're really good, really effective vaccines, and we can see clearly from overseas can stop the transmission occurring. So,
how often is the state government going to expect small business to pay for all of this? And, you know, it wasn't that long ago in February that they flicked the switch off, and which was absolutely devastating for small business back then. And where's the money going to come from? I mean, and we had customers in this morning, Ros, saying, oh, well, you know, the government's got to do the right thing. We understand that, but someone's got to pay for all of this. And this is not me having a whinge expecting handouts from the government, but there needs to be consultation with the industry.
Now, it is the 4th time Melbourne has been plunged into lockdown since the pandemic began, including nearly 4 months of harsh restrictions last year. The cluster is believed to have begun with a traveller who returned to Australia from overseas despite a mandatory 14-day quarantine. Before the lockdown was announced, thousands of people across Melbourne were already self-isolating after cases were detected at dozens of locations, including 2 separate Aussie rules football matches, a series of nightclubs, and a medieval battle reenactment. Schools, pubs, and restaurants are set to close while gatherings will be banned and mask wearing made mandatory. But professional sporting fixtures can go ahead without crowds, and people living alone can create a single bubble with another person. New Zealand has already suspended its travel bubble with Victoria, and while residents are now being shut out of other Australian states, prompting major airlines to slash Melbourne services.
Back here in the Philippines now, Malacanang raised the possibility that the quarantine classification in the country might be relaxed in June. Take a look.
As usual, alam niyo po ang IATF is a collegial body. Napakahirap pong pangunahan. Pero ang sa akin lang naman po, consistent ang formula natin, yung 2-week daily average rate, attack rate, yung daily attack rate na parehong negative po ngayon for Metro Manila and for the entire Philippines. At saka titignan din natin yung hospital care utilization rate na sa ngayon po ay nasa low risk. So everything else being considered, there is a likelihood na mas magluluwag ang ating quarantine classification. Pero gaya ng sinabi ni Chairman Abalos, ang mga mayors are of the belief and they have recommended na unti-unti yung gagawin nating pagbubukas ng ekonomiya. So I guess by way of conclusion, there's a likelihood that the quarantine classification might be relaxed on the basis of formula, but subject to the recommendation of the Metro Manila mayors na any further reopening should be gradual. Because it is already 28th, no, hindi po aabot sa susunod na talk to the people ng presidente sa Lunes, no. So although that is already the 31st. No? So tignan po natin, no? It could be announced by the President himself on the 31st or it could be announced earlier after maproseso yung mga appeal ng ilang mga LGU.
Roque has said members of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases would also make a recommendation on the country's implementation of travel restrictions on passengers from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. The Philippines extended the prohibition of entry of travelers from India and for other countries that are part of the Indian subcontinent until May 31st. The country also decided to expand the coverage of the travel ban by including Oman and the United Arab Emirates after 2 overseas Filipino workers who returned from the Arab states tested positive for India's double mutant B1617 variant.
And the Philippines will consider vaccinating teenagers once there is a steady supply of COVID-19 vaccines developed by U.S. drug maker Pfizer. That, according to Malacanang, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this statement after the Food and Drug Administration of the Philippines announced that it would amend the emergency use authorization of Pfizer to allow its use on 12 to 15-year-old teenagers. Take a look.
Gagamitin po natin ng Pfizer pag dumating na yung ating mga biniling mga Pfizer. Kasi yung mga Pfizer na dumarating po ngayon, galing po yan sa COVAX facility, kinakailangan po ilaan natin yan para sa mga indigents. Pero wag po kayo mag-aalala, no? Matapos po yung July 4 sa Amerika na tinatawag nilang Independence Day from COVID, ay inaasahan natin na luluwag na ang supply ng Pfizer. So dahil yan lang naman po ang bakuna na po pwede sa teenagers, asahan po natin na bibili tayo ng mas marami pang Pfizer para sa mga teenagers.
The Philippines received an initial 193,050 doses of Pfizer COVID vaccine supplied by the World Health Organization-led COVAX facility on May 10. Last Monday, WHO Country Representative Rabindra Abiasinghe said the Philippines is set to receive an additional 2 million doses of Pfizer vaccine through the COVAX facility. This will be in June. Secretary Roque assured that the government will procure more doses of Pfizer Pfizer vaccines for Filipino teenagers after the U.S. celebrates Independence Day. U.S. President Joe Biden, to recall, expressed hope that the U.S. can mark independence from COVID-19 on July 4.
Staying here in the Philippines, the Department of Health on Thursday reported 4,335 new recovered cases, pushing the total number of COVID-19 recoveries nationwide to 1,131,942. In its latest COVID-19 bulletin, the DOH said the figure is equivalent to a 94.3% recovery rate out of a total of 1,200,430 infections since the start of the pandemic last year. It also reported tallied 6,483 new confirmed COVID-19 cases, bringing the total number of active cases to 48,109. Of the active cases, about 92.7% are mild, 2.2% are asymptomatic, 2.1% are severe, 1.47% are moderate, and 1.6% are in critical condition. It also logged 210 new deaths, pushing the death toll to 20,379, or 1.7% of total cases.
Britain's health secretary denied lying to colleagues and the country over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. This after a scathing broadside from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's former top advisor. The attack came from Dominic Cummings, who also called Johnson, quote, unfit for the job, raised new questions about whether tens of thousands of people died needlessly because of government incompetence and dishonesty. Let's listen in.
Well, it has been these allegations that were put yesterday and repeated by the Right Honourable Gentleman are serious allegations, and I welcome the opportunity to come to the House to put formally on the record that these unsubstantiated allegations around honesty are not true, and that I've been straight with people in public and in private throughout. Sometimes what we've had to say hasn't been easy. We've had to level with people when it's been tough, when things have been going in the wrong direction. It was, of course, a difficult challenge, especially at the start when many characteristics of this virus were unknown. And as I've answered many times in this House, we have published the full details of the approach that we take and that we took. And we worked with the care home sector as much as possible to keep people safe.
Hancock claimed in May 2020 to have thrown a protective ring around care homes, but the main opposition Labour Party noted that 30,000 elderly residents have died of COVID-19 and 20,000 older patients were discharged from hospitals without testing. Responding to the testimony, Downing Street said Prime Minister Johnson continues to have confidence in Hancock and does not believe the minister has been untruthful. Coronavirus has claimed nearly 128,000 lives in the UK, the fifth highest official death toll in the world and the highest in Europe.
Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Kita.
Romeo! Wag! Wag!
So it was you who planned to kill me.
Ang tanging hiling ko lang, Romeo. Sana'y baka mahalin mo at alagaan ng mabuti si Maya. Kakasal lang kapatid ko. I'm happy for you.
Sigurado ka bang itutuloy mo ito? Anak, matutuloy ang kasal mo ngayon. Pero paano bukas? Sa makalawa, paano pag nagising na si Romeo?
Let me say this for one last time. Pwede ka pang umatras. Let's start over again. Together, as a family.
Althea!
Sa'yo habang may buhay, di tayo maghihiwalay. Ikaw ay akin sa langit at sa mundo.
Welcome back to the news. The Philippines remains an attractive market for manufacturing investments. Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO Manila Office Investment and Economic Partnership Agreement advisor Tomihiro Ando said today. At the Security Bank's Virtual Economic Forum, Ando cited a JETRO survey in December 2020 indicating Japanese businesses saw the Philippines as a good investment destination for manufacturing. Ando said salaries in the Philippines are much more stable than other countries in the region. The country's demographics are also attractive with its young population and large marketplace, he added. Ando said the JETRO survey shows that manufacturing cost in the Philippines relative to Japan is the second lowest in the region, with cost only higher than Vietnam but lower compared to Asian countries like India, China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. The latest data from the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or PEZA, show that Japan has been the agency's top source of foreign direct investments for the past 26 years.
Teenagers suing to block expansion of an Australian coal mine scored a landmark victory today, with a judge agreeing that the project would cause them climate-related harm. A group of 8 high schoolers, backed by an activist, octogenarian nun, brought a class action against Australia's pro-coal Conservative government over a planned mine extension near Sydney, while a federal judge rejected the group's calls for an injunction to stop the project outright. He ruled the government must take into account the damage the project would do to the group's health, wealth, and well-being. The minister has a duty to take reasonable care to avoid causing personal injury to the children when deciding to approve or not to approve the extension project that, according to Justice Morty Bromberg. Legal experts said the ruling was significant because it was the first time a court had accepted expert testimony about the vast potential impact of climate change on younger generations and the government's duty to consider that impact in weighing new fossil fuel projects. In the ruling, Bromberg accepted harrowing expert evidence of a grim future on a warming planet.
And under other environmental news, the world may temporarily reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming mark within the next 5 years, according to an updated assessment of global climate trends released today. The World Meteorological Organization and Britain's Met Office said there was a 40% chance of the annual average global temperature surpassing 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures, the aspirational warming limit of the Paris Climate Accord. According to the Met Office's updated global 10-year climate prediction, there is a 90% chance of at least 1 year between 2021 to 2025 being the hottest on record. It said the annual average global temperature over the next 5 years is likely to be at least 1 degree Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels, within a range of 0.9 to 1.0 8 degrees warmer. The landmark 2015 Paris climate deal saw nations commit to limit global temperature rises to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
And it's time to head over to Julianne in Las Vegas for a look at the movie options for this week. Julianne?
Chaos Walking, already in theaters, is a uniquely interesting dystopian action film based on Patrick Ness's science fiction trilogy. With so many people posting every detail of their lives on social media these days, author Ness questions, what if the next progression is you had no choice in what you put out for everyone to see? Imagine if your thoughts could be heard and seen by the people around you. Referred to as the noise in the movie, it's an affliction suffered by men on a planet colonized by humans in the not-too-distant future.
Viola crash lands on this planet where the women have disappeared.
Girl. It's a girl. Oh my God. Where are you?
She's discovered by Todd Hewitt, who, after his initial shock, instinctively sets out on a journey to protect Viola and unlock the planet's dark secrets. While the concept might seem simple enough, bringing the book to the big screen was no easy task.
Writing the noise is a huge challenge because for something like that, you need to have a consistent rule. Like, when do we hear the noise? The idea is that it's kind of constantly happening, but then that would drown out any scene you could try to write. And sometimes that's the point. It's like people are just inundated with it. Such a unique concept that almost breaks screenplay format. Like, you don't even know how to write it. We had to figure out a way to use it to tell the story and not just overwhelm every moment.
My parents are dead. Special effects aside, creating relatable characters was also a strong focus.
The phrase strong hero, strong female is used a lot in YA. And I worry that it gets in the way of her being fully human. You know, of course she's going to be strong, but there are moments where she's going to be weak, just like Todd. There's moments where she's going to be incredibly clever, but there's moments where she's going to make stupid mistakes, just like Todd, just like human beings do. And so that's what I want. That's what I want my nieces to see. That's what I want, young readers to see. I want to see a fully human, fully realized, complicated person, because that's what a teenage years are about.
It's interesting because we did the initial shoot and then we did some additional photography. The initial shoot was tricky in that I spent a lot of the time feeling confused as to what was going on. And Viola's confused, so it feels like it should work. But it was like trying to navigate how Viola and Todd work together. You know, it's a tricky thing making relationships right when there are 100 other things going on. So I always felt that Viola was a bit, not darker, but when I watched the film, I was surprised by the lightness with which Viola operates. And I think the additional photography was actually really helpful because I think everyone had a chance to figure out, like, how the relationship was really gonna work. And then me and Tom knew each other a bit longer, so it was like easier for us to have more of like a repartee.
But I'm afraid of her, right? Yeah. I think you're afraid of her in that first second because you're like, whoa. And then that's gotta... And then just inquisitive.
So all of those things were actually really, really helpful to come back and tweak, and we had a couple new scenes.
Side note, guys, this is a great movie to catch in theaters, but the home entertainment pack being released today features nearly an hour of deleted scenes. So if you want to dive deeper into the story and experience, that might be your better option. For all you creatively gifted or inspired people out there, I have to say that Cruella is a must-see. It's set around the story of how Cruella develops into the character we know from 101 Dalmatians. But more importantly, the show is a great lesson in creativity, in storytelling, set designs, and my personal favorite for the film, fashion design.
Do you have a light?
The sheer luck of a movie like this is that the costumes do a lot of your work for you as an actor. Once you put those things on, you feel like Cruella de Vil.
Fashion is omnipresent in this film. So we got Academy Award winner Jenny Bevan. She's done it all.
Cruella and the Baroness are adversaries in their work.
The Baroness is at the height of fashion in the 1970s. How is Cruella going to disrupt the establishment?
Fashion is Cruella's tool of revenge.
This film is the biggest thing I've ever done. Emma Stone had 47 looks. It was very important to me for Cruella to be black, white, grey, and red. I want to make art, and I want to make trouble.
To first see the entire look of Cruella together, I have to admit I took a lot of pictures. It was a very narcissistic day, which is perfect for Cruella.
We'll just have to destroy her as we have so many before. Find her.
Cruella comes out this Friday in theaters and on Disney+, so you can choose the option safest for your family. Also coming out Friday is A Quiet Place Part 2, which picks up right from where A Quiet Place 1 left off. It's a thriller that can only be seen on the big screen, and according to John Krasinski, the director, writer, and producer, that was no accident.
Every step is much more treacherous.
It definitely ratchets up the tension, and you know they're not safe.
We made this movie for the theaters. You know, not only visually from the first one did we do a bunch of new things, and the world's bigger and the tension's bigger and all those things because they're no longer safe at home, but from a sound perspective, I mean, we knew how much people loved being in the audience, being quiet, and then when it got loud and playing with sound all around. So we spent so much time making sure that this experience here was unlike any experience you can watch this movie. And so for me, this is the only way to see this movie. I didn't know I could make a movie as personal as the first one.
Ronnie, what do we got? Some kind of fire? We got units headed out there now.
As psychotic as it sounds, the first movie was a love letter to my kids. And so the second movie to me had to be as organic and as powerful emotionally as the first one. And I think a lot of people think that sequels just become a sequel just because you can, and I certainly didn't want any part of that. I had one idea in my head, which was, what if you made Millie the lead of this movie? And this little girl is unbelievable in this movie. She carries the movie. And it really became this idea of if the first movie was about the promise we all make to our kids, which is I'll be there for you always. All parents know that that promise is going to be broken inevitably. And so the second movie is about when that promise is broken, which is what growing up really is. And so these kids learn to go out into the world on their own. And so I hope people take from it, that idea of when you're scared, when things get dark or sad, that you just put one foot in front of the other and you try to do it all together. You can't do this on your own. You have to find people to do it with.
A great takeaway that you don't normally find in a scary movie.
So whether you're looking into stepping into a new and unique story experience with Chaos Walking, or the bold and playful fashion extravaganza in Cruella, or even if you're set on watching a thrilling movie that puts you on the edge of your seat almost the whole time, like A Quiet Place Part 2, this is definitely a good time to get back into the theaters. In Las Vegas, Julianne Docena, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Miss watching on the big screen. Yeah.
Well, I did hear really good reviews for Chaos Walking as well as for the performance of Tom Holland there. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to getting a Disney Plus too.
Okay, yeah, me too. Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Pro. Tomorrow's Friday. Please join us again.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.